All right, everybody. So today we have back on the podcast fan favorite Abel Csabai. What's up, man?
Hey, I'm all good. The pronunciation is getting better and better. Very, very honored.
Great. So if anybody notices that the audio quality is not as good, literally as we were starting, my higher quality microphone cord just completely broke. So same day delivery. Thank you, Amazon. We'll have it probably for the next podcast, but today gonna have to plow through.
Yeah. Just broke it a day early.
Right. So we have been talking quite a bit. I mean, so if people don't know, I mean, Abel, Brian Borst, and I, a couple others, like regularly talk on Instagram, and at least a lot of good discussions. And I feel like half the time we're saying, we should have these on a podcast. And obviously, we can't always be recording, but it does lead to a lot of interesting topics. So, we're going to get into today about gym culture and the gym environment, some specific exercises like deadlifts and lower back issues, the goals when you're advanced, and like kind of how to stay motivated in the gym, some really practical stuff in terms of rep speed versus maybe more controlled reps and mechanical positioning, and then a little bit as far as like time off, and I'm sure it's somewhere in there the whole steroids and genetics thing is going to get talked about, I'm sure. So
Yeah.
so one thing we talked about early yesterday was the gym environment. It was something that I think we talk about how different the culture is where you are, in a more like isolated area in Europe versus where I am in the States. And I was saying how my gym, if anybody's seen my videos of what I call the McDonald's gym, so retro, it basically was like, it was not as, I guess I would say, low level as a university gym where I spend most of my time training, but it was not very busy, and there weren't a lot of like really impressive physiques there. And I've recently switched to a gym where, I mean, clearly plenty of people there use gear, very impressive physiques, and not everybody. There's plenty of just like dad bods as well, but the caliber of physique is a lot higher. And I mentioned how even after all this time, I do notice just a different sense. I mean, we tend to think of where we are in like a hierarchy, right? I mean, this isn't just with lifting, I mean, this is with anything, right? I mean, you kind of compare yourself to neighbors in a certain environment of like wealth and attractiveness, and even like partners attractiveness. I mean, and all in all, as much as we try to say don't compare yourself, and I think that's generally a good way to go about life, we all inherently do it. And I've made other videos where I actually have a whole solo video where it talks about where I think the quote was, it's like, just focus on yourself is kind of BS, because even when you're going to purchase things, right? If you were to say to like, somebody with fitness, it's like, hey, well, just focus on yourself. Well, it's like, yeah, but if you're a coach, let's say, or you're selling a program, people are going to compare you to somebody else, right? So there's constant comparisons in life all the time. That's how we, hey, you want to go somewhere? Like, let's look at the Google reviews and compare here to here. I mean, so you can get into a whole long discussion on that. But all that to say that with the gym, I think the gym you're in does kind of influence how you feel. So I don't know, we can kind of start with that. Abel, if you have any thoughts. I think also, just as a kind of closing intro point, something like Planet Fitness. This is why I think they actually literally do not allow like really serious lifters and like heavy lifters there, which in a way is discriminatory, but it's their gym. They can kind of do what they want. And there are a lot of people who would feel intimidated in a more serious gym.
Mm. Yeah. I definitely agree that the gym environment you're in matters. And so I lived for like a longer time in Hungary. Obviously, that's where I'm from. Now in North Macedonia, that's the second longest time I spent. And then in the Netherlands, in total, I was about 3 years. I was in New Zealand for about a year and a half. I was in Malta for like 6 months or something. So like I got to try like at least like 3-4 gyms in each of these countries. And honestly, like what I noticed over time is, of course, the equipment is very important and how good the gym is. So like that is the number one concern for me still. But I have been just in so many gyms where you would go there and you would just feel bad. Like in Hungary, for example, I told you this yesterday, but it's still crazy to me that even the staff members and the owner and whoever there is not realizing that this is just a bad way of going about things. But I would get out of the car and I would just have to take like a deep breath, like, okay, like going through the reception is just gonna be like a minute. It's gonna be okay. But it's just like the people are rude, like condescending. Some of them, like in this current gym, for example, that I'm using now, or have used for like 5 years, I'm sort of switching it up now, which is hard because it's at a very convenient location and it's like a 5 minute walk or 10 minute walk from my apartment, and the equipment is good. It's maybe the best gym in the city, and I'm still considering switching it to another one where I have to drive like 25 minutes, because when I'm going to that other place, like the people are nice to me, everybody's smiling, they're kind. Like I was away for like a week or something and they were like, oh, like where have you been? And I was or I think I was their first member because it was a new gym, and so they are continuously giving me like a 25% discount to like honor my loyalty or whatever. And I know that it's all for business, but it still makes me feel nice. And in this other gym, man, like the staff members are like walking up and down, and like these mid-20s guys, and they're like looking at me like this, like looking for the eye contact. And sometimes I'm actually thinking like, what if I look back for too long? Like he's gonna come up like in a bar, like, hey, look, you need anything, dude? Like what the hell? Like do they think that this is good business practice? Like what the hell? So yeah, it definitely matters a lot, even if you're a very serious trainee. So yeah.
Listening, comment below on like if you think or if how you are in the gym is more of the standoffish, like head down, long sleeve shirt kind of a thing, or more of the, I don't want to say like it's a social time, but more friendly in the gym and everything. Because I've talked before about how from initial training, maybe 13, 14 in the gym to college, I was always that person who, because of the influence that I had from like more serious lifters, like you don't talk to people in the gym, you don't wear cutoffs, like any of that stuff. And then I met my kind of like bro friends in college. And frankly, it was, I actually started to enjoy the gym more because again, it's not like, hey, I'm going to be talking the whole time, but you meet people, you become friendly with people. And I think like anything, there is that culture and environment where thankfully at the gyms I've been in, most people are very friendly. So I think, obviously you can think of the examples of like, the girl who gets hit on too much of the gym and just wants to be able to go there and lift. So I'm not saying like be talking to everybody who doesn't want to talk to you and be that annoying person. But at this new gym, like I've already met probably 4 people by name. And, when I see them, it's friendly. I think that to me, at least that adds to the gym experience. And probably while I'll always have some gym membership, even when I eventually have, a very nice home gym, which I'd like to really invest in at some point, for even when I do that, I think I'm still going to keep a gym membership, even if it's only once or twice a week, because I think there is a culture to it.
Yeah. And like for me personally, the ideal gym is one that is completely empty. So, and so it matters to me if people are nice, but so once I start working out, like I hate it when people come up and like try to chit chat or something. Like I'm avoiding eye contact. Like I'm sure you have some, or at least have had some people like this in your gym who like come up and start like chit chatting and they just don't get the signs and they just like stick around. Yeah. So that drives me crazy. But still, like even for those 10 seconds when you're like going through reception or something, it matters if you feel like you're being treated like crap or they're like really polite and nice to you.
Yeah. So. Well, that was the problem. My old gym, it was great because it was always dead, but because it was always dead, it closed down. So it's there's a balance for sure. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, one of the things I said is that since being in this gym, there has been definitely more of like I wouldn't say like a pressure, but maybe more of a desire to like push things. And I've already made the decision, many times logically that, I'm not going to start, blasting gear, or I'm not going to like push anything that's going to screw my health, but I can kind of feel that. And I think it kind of touches on the importance of having concrete goals, because in the same way that maybe like a beginner goes off their goals because they don't have it maybe written down or it's not enough of a focus, I think even at an advanced stage, you have this issue where you can kind of be like, well, I'm already where I'm at. This is something I've said before, like, I'm kind of just maxed out. So what is there left to do? But I've been kind of trying to think of things that I would even care about at this stage. I think it's great that there are people like Alpha Destiny, who says he doesn't think there's any real limit and you can always progress. Same thing with like somebody like Jeff Alberts, who's 50 plus and quote unquote progressing. But at least for me, in terms of tangible things, I think it's very hard to really find things at that stage. So you're not in the game as long, but I mean, you're what, maybe 10 years now?
Yeah, yeah. It's either that or like or 9 or something. So yeah.
Yeah. So, I would imagine it's going to come relatively soon. Have you thought about things you would strive for? Like we talked, you actually made a good point that, well, maybe you should touch on that. Like that when people say, oh, well, just back off and do other hobbies, you kind of had a problem with that advice at an advanced stage.
Yeah. It's because, and not just, by the way, not just at an advanced stage, but even in general, people say these things very easily. So I said that a lot too. Like when you're, get your training in check, like whatever. If you're dieting, get that in check. But then there's no need to like read about it more, to like spend all your time thinking about it. Just like focus on other things. And even that is easier said than done. But especially that, like, yeah, if you're someone who maxed out pretty much on their progress, people say that very easily, that, hey, just, put training on the back burner, now focus on other areas of your life, shift focus. But man, you have spent, I don't know, 8, 10, 15 years really dedicated to this hobby, and you made tons of sacrifices, and it was an integral part of your life. It wasn't just something that you did on the weekends, like you go and, I don't know, do some shooting on the field or something. It's like you were there multiple times a week, tweaking your diet, changing how you live your social life and everything. And those are sacrifices, yes, but at the same time, I mean, this was, for those of us that were really into it, our most involved hobby that we ever had, probably. I mean, few things I could compare to that. Like if someone is like a really big gamer or something, where someone is like a hobbyist musician, but they're serious about it, that could be similar. But unlike those other hobbies, like, yeah, in this one, like you really do kind of get to a stage where you really need to change your perspective completely. Like there just won't really be, at least as a natural, there won't really be new heights that you can explore and new really big achievements that you can unlock. Or maybe there will be, but they will be very different than how they were in the first, I don't know, like 5 years or something. So, and the analogy I use there, I think it is like when you have a girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever for 8, 10 years, and all of a sudden, like, you break up for some reason, and someone was just saying to you, hey, like, just no worries, you will just find another one. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, sure, I understand that in theory, but that's not a very trivial thing. Like, don't just say it that easily. So I think it can be very, very tough. And I think, like that's why for a lot of people at that point, the logical next step is going on gear. For a lot of others, it might be getting into coaching very seriously, or starting their own whatever fitness business. But yeah, just shifting focus, man, that's tough. But I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think that, that's not at all why I started the podcast, but certainly the podcast has given me a much more involvement in there. I mean, obviously, like, I wouldn't have be coaching with Steve right now if I never started the podcast, because I probably wouldn't even know Steve. I probably would have I really don't know. I mean, it was such a huge thing. I mean, I've said before, like years ago, I was like, I don't even know what my life would be like if I never got into lifting, because it's been ubiquitous throughout most of my life that I can even remember, that I don't even know what I would do. And the people who don't have any exercise in their life, I also wonder, like, what are you doing with your time? Like, I don't know, which is not to say that I should be shamed or anything. It's just such a big part of my life. It's almost hard to imagine at this point. And then with the gear thing, yeah, I mean, I know a number of people who said that gear going on really reinvigorated their passion for it. I think the problem with that is that you end up at the same place anyway. Now you'll have a more impressive physique, but unless you continue, like, let's just say you're like, well, I'll just go up to 500 milligrams of test. Okay, that's going to be done in like a year. You're not going to just keep going up, and then you change the compounds around, you up the dose, but eventually you are just going to have to take more things. You're going to have to experiment with more things. And it just becomes this thing that you adapt to, and then you have to do more of. And then the bigger problem is you have that fall from grace, right? I mean, that's honestly one of the biggest reasons that I'd be concerned about it. Is it's like, okay, so you gain 20 pounds of muscle, Well, you're not going to stay on gear forever. And as I said yesterday, there are guys who are really naturally jacked, like Jeff Alberts. He is going to be very impressive until he's probably 70. Is he going to be as impressive at 50, at 70 compared to 50? No. But he's still, because he's naturally gifted, he is still going to be very impressive. But if you had to use gear to get to be as impressive as Jeff is at 50, then by the time you're 70, you're probably going to have fallen a lot more. And then obviously the whole lifelong dependence on TRT and all that. But I just think that it's more problematic when you have to do that and you're still always chasing it. And it's just so easy. I mean, this is what I say about like the people who are just on TRT. You've made it so easy to just throw in something, right? Oh, well,
Yeah.
3 times a year, 2 times a year for summer or whatever, I go up the dose, I take this oral, whatever it is. And again, I'm not saying that's the end of the world. I'm just saying that if you're completely natural, you kind of know that's not going to do anything. Like, yeah, I guess you could do a cycle of something before the summer, but like you've more or less closed yourself off to that possibility when you say I'm not going to take anything versus I'll take something, and then it muddies the water a little bit. And just like the analogy, like I was thinking, like you said with the girlfriend, I think it's just like to other sports in general. That's one thing that is really great about lifting is that with a lot of sports, like you think of like wrestling, where especially wrestling actually, where nobody does it after college. I mean, yeah, there's like the Olympics, but like if you play tennis, you can still play tennis the rest of your life. You can golf the rest of your life. You can still technically play basketball and like football, I guess, the rest of your life. But some of these, I mean, most people are not playing football at 40 plus, right? I mean, but some of these sports are lifelong
Mm.
sports. But if you like wrestle, it is a very intense sport. It's most of your life if you're really serious about it. And then you graduate college and you're just done. Like you never wrestle again. And it's just like depressing because that was such a huge part of your life. Whereas lifting, I mean, the nice thing is you can do it literally forever. And really you should do it forever for most
Yeah.
people. But I think it just becomes hard to the goal can't be, in my opinion, every year, well, I'm trying to gain more muscle. I'm trying to gain more muscle. Like, I think if that's still always your goal after like 10 plus years, well, I don't know. I mean, what do you think about that? I don't think it's realistic. I guess you could keep the goal. I just think it's maybe not, I think it's a little delusional, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, I don't know. For example, in the summer, I think I said this when we chatted privately that in the summer, I had a really fun time being completely purposeless, for example. So I was basically like, I had my wedding and then it was kind of, I wouldn't say a hectic period because like we didn't go anywhere and whatever, but basically each day I was just doing my thing. And then I went to the gym in the afternoon. I walked there and walked back. So like basically the part of the whole gym thing was just like getting a good walk. So like that was at least like a 20-30 minute walking experience right there. And it completely freestyled in the gym. So sometimes I was doing drop sets, sometimes I was doing some like rest pause. I threw in some new exercises here and there. And over like 2-3 months, like I could tell that, I don't know, like maybe actually I regressed a little bit because it was just so unstructured and recovery was also like not on point always. But actually I enjoyed it a lot. And what actually made it, I think, easier to still enjoy it while being that purposeless is staying lean. So because like it was like this whole ritual of going to the gym, getting my walk in, getting my workout in, and then coming home having like the nice post-workout meal. And so I'm not saying that this is like a good template for everybody, but maybe actually that's just a thing that, for example, with leanness, like how lean can I stay with that sort of thing? Like there will actually be more little things you can unlock as you go on, because there are a lot of little life skills that you can learn. So maybe that's another thing that can kind of prolong this enthusiasm for fitness in general. But yeah, when it comes to lifting, I will say that this might actually be the first year for me when I just found it really difficult to be like really structured with my muscle building plan. So like the winter period came and I was actually really planning on going on like kind of a lean bulk. and okay, like I'm gonna stop the freestyling in the gym. I'm gonna have like a set rotation, and that's what I'm gonna do. And man, I just couldn't stick to it, like not even for a whole week, honestly. Like I could just never have a concrete like rotation. It probably, I should have hired a coach if I was really serious about that, because I could just not get myself to do it. Like so yeah, so I already see the writing on the wall here that this could be difficult. So yeah, and probably a big the whole reason I said this, I'm sorry, I'm gonna shut up then. Just you asked like, do I think it's a good idea to still strive for like maximal muscle growth? I mean, probably the reason I have this difficulty is because I know it's just not realistic to really expect that much.
Yeah.
So
yeah, a couple points there. So quick question: when you walk half an hour to the gym, do your whole workout, I'm guessing a little over an hour, and then walk back, are you eating anything, or you just go a couple hours without eating around the peri-workout time?
So 15 minutes there, 15 back, so half an hour in total,
Oh,
the
okay.
walk. But
Gotcha.
yeah, actually probably the biggest gap in my meals, like in terms of how far apart they are, is in my like first meal and then my post-workout meal. So that will often be actually like a good 6 hours, sometimes even longer, which might
Really?
not be optimal. But yeah, actually I don't know, maybe it's some like leftover from my like eating disorder ridden past or something, but I kind of enjoy that feeling of like, by the time I finish with my workout, like I'm getting kind of hungry,
Yeah.
and I come home and then I like really enjoy that post-workout meal.
Yeah. Well, I very much enjoy the post-workout meal, but so to clarify, you'll have your first meal and then there'll be a couple hours before you go to the gym, so that by the time you're having your post-workout meal, it's been 6 hours.
Yeah,
Wow. Okay.
pretty
Yeah,
much.
that's a
Yeah.
long time. At the end there, and you were saying, one of the reasons that it's harder for you is because you're like, well, realistically, I know that it's not going to be, you're not going to gain that much. And I think that is a really important point when it comes to people who claim to be like so motivated and claim to be, so dedicated. And it's like, you might actually be, but you also have to factor in that a huge part of that is your success. So like, let's take somebody like a Jared Feather, right? He's so dedicated and he's so motivated to do this, and he's so consistent. But it's like, yeah, because from pretty much Jump Street, you were top of the top, right? Your response within a year was ridiculous. You obviously have amazing genetics for it. It is much easier to be dedicated to something when you're really good at it than when you suck, right? This is why people have inclinations towards whatever they're good at, right? You got the jocks who excel in a sport, and then you got the cliche nerds who excel at chess club, right? And like that's because they gravitate towards what they're good at. And so I think it is harder, not to say, and again, not to downplay their dedication, but if I have somebody as a client, let's say, who's like 5 years in and they barely look like they lift, it is understandable for that person that it is harder to be motivated, because they feel like, I'm not seeing, again, going back to one of the first points, we do compare ourselves to others, right? I mean, this is one of the biggest arguments I think about when people say, who cares who's on steroids? It's like, you should care, because we absolutely are going to compare yourselves. And you can't tell some kid who's been lifting for a couple of years, who's benching 180, but maybe sees everybody benching like 300 plus. And like, I always reference the T Nation forum saying, this guy was like, if you're not 200 plus pounds within 2 years of lifting, you're in the wrong sport, or you don't know what you're doing. Basically, it's like, you don't know what you're doing. It's like, that's a horrible message, right? I mean, to go tell Jeff Alberts that he's not big enough because he's not 200 pounds after 30 years, right? I mean, it's just a ridiculous thing to say. So I just think that that's a big, your response to it has a huge impact on how dedicated you are. And the last thing is, as far as that unstructured, it's funny because I am a very structured person. I always have a routine, and, I analyze data and all these things like that. But one of the things that one of my favorite times to lift is when I've gone on cruises, and like I wake up early, like 6 a.m., and it's just like a beautiful scenery. Like you're literally just in the middle of the ocean, but I don't have a structured routine on a cruise. I go in there, I just have like a fun lift on machines. And even though it's a very hard workout, to me, that's fun. I wouldn't want to do that all the time. And then I go feast on like the endless buffet for breakfast and everything. Like that's really one of my favorite like memories and things I do. So I wouldn't want that all the time, but I could see how maybe for a summer while you're really lean, that could be something that's fun.
Yeah, yeah. It's to be honest, like I think it's so. First of all, that's a good point about like who is motivated and who isn't. Like I always had when I was talking, like when people see me like going to the gym every day, and like I did that for a long time, like 7 days a week, and not no day off for God knows how long, and being like really serious about everything. And they would look at me and say like, wow, you must either like you're really disciplined, which I always rejected because it's like, well, no, like I enjoy it, so like it doesn't really require discipline. And then the other one would be like, wow, like you're really motivated. But I mean, it's is it motivation? Like I was excited to see how far I can push things. So it's which doesn't mean like it doesn't preclude you from being motivated as well. But I don't know, it's whenever someone is talking about like being really process oriented and really dedicated to the whole thing, and then I see them just looking phenomenal, like it doesn't mean that they're not really all that, but it's just maybe invalidate, not in making me a bit skeptical. It's kind of like the person at a like personal development seminar or something who is like clearly this like extroverted, like super well spoken person, and it's like, oh, just be confident, like like who cares what others are thinking? It's like, but dude, of course, if I was you, probably I wouldn't care either. Like
Right.
and but yeah, like the other thing that you were saying about the structure part, like that honestly again is coming back to like how much, like the more excited you are about what you can still achieve, I think the more bullshit you're willing to put up with. So it's literally now just a matter of I walk into a gym, and if I see that a piece of equipment I wanted to use is taken, I just don't care, I guess, enough about the whole thing to wait for that equipment. I'm gonna do something else. Like I want to train my quads. Okay, the hack squat is taken. Then okay, I'm gonna do the leg extensions today, or I'm gonna do some leg presses, and not gonna care about the neural like learning that I will still have to do because I'm just gonna do that today, and so the whole thing ends up being a mess. So
Final thing I would say on that is you made a point about, well, when you're that advanced and you can kind of like focus on like the leanness, it really, I would say you can focus on almost anything. And like the nice thing is that you can detect these changes, right? So that is one thing, like when you've been doing the same thing for so long and you've basically been the same for so long, if you change anything, it's a fairly well controlled environment, right? So if like I say, hey, I'm doing this, and hey, Steve is going to add in drop sets. It's like, okay, if anything's going to work, like we're going to notice it because, these measurements or this strength has been exactly the same. That's why, like, when I put that 1 rep on my pull up PR, it's like, yeah, well, that was like a legitimate 1 rep gain. And that's because I've been at the same for so long. So you can detect things. So if you are analytical, you can kind of have some fun with things and then experiment and say, okay, well, let's add this one movement and can I see any change? And you can more so attribute it to that change rather than like, when you're getting started, it's like, who the hell knows why this happened? There's so many changes going on at once.
yeah, no, that's a good point.
So we were talking a little bit about exercise selection. And I do think that one thing I hear like Dante Trudell talk about, obviously we've heard a lot with Doug Brignoli and Kassem and Mike a little bit, but other people I've heard talk about it, is the importance of the right exercises. And I kind of agree with that over, something Dante always says is like, if your biceps are lagging, do you really think that it's just like you've been doing curls, barbell curls for 10 years and your biceps are lagging? Do you think that it's really that you need more volume on those same barbell curls? And I would kind of agree with him that, I mean, one, I think, again, it's mostly going to be genetics, right? If you have lagging biceps, I've very, very rarely seen somebody, especially like calves, but even other muscle groups where it's like this body part was lagging and now it's a strong point. Like usually things just kind of grow symmetrically. But I would still say that of the two options, I think finding a unique exercise that really targets it better for you is probably more likely to get more growth than just saying, hey, I was doing, 9 sets. Now let's increase it by 33% to 12 sets. Like, I really just don't believe that that's going to do a lot, How do you feel about that?
I would tend to agree. I mean, of course, I think just yesterday we chatted, you, Brian, and I, about why, like, if all of these things are true, like these are the things that matter for training, like volume and then failure proximity, maybe not that much. Then why do we so many people spinning their wheels? And like you made a good point, for example, about staying at the same weight. So all that is to say that like there can be a lot of factors why someone's arms are not growing, for example. But I think with exercises, I think like in I just my own example, I had so many times when I could have made a lot of progress on a given lift, but I just had to stop because like it was always like irritated my elbow or something, and then maybe I took that too far. So then I had to like maybe take some time off from that movement pattern, or even like just make my training so light that it was actually like not that stimulative anymore. And and I think maybe it won't be as bad for some people, but then I think if you find a movement that is like that like really fits you, and then you can just consistently push yourself harder on that, um, then I think over time it will make a difference, even if it's a small one. So it's kind of the same thing as, and this is not necessarily like the right analogy, or not even the right example, because maybe it actually doesn't matter that much how close you train to failure. But like, if training like 0 RIR is like a little bit more stimulative than training 2 RIR, in a month, maybe even in a year, it won't do anything. But over like a long time, like those many little extra reps that you get in, those could make a difference. And I think the same thing could be the case on this one, if nothing else. So I'm not even talking about like the biomechanical fanciness here, just this simple aspect.
I think the volume thing, most people have come around that I've seen at least that like, yeah, you need sufficient volume. More volume can be helpful, but it's not, I don't think it's like this big game changer. I think that like though the right position or the right exercises can make more of a difference for sure. Especially it seems like back is a big one for a lot of people. Like there really are people who that is one area I have seen people more so bring up that it's like they're just really not training their back correctly, or they're really focusing on the wrong exercises, or it's like all momentum or whatever. And I've probably seen the most changes of somebody changing their back. And I know this is something that you're always wanting to work on. You mentioned like with like the erectors and stuff.
Yeah.
I think you said now that you don't feel like you can do RDLs, you're going to buy, what was it?
Yeah, man. It's I think at this point I just have to say like I'm gonna give this up. I'm gonna be turning I'm gonna be turning old. I won't say it because you will get a lot of comments saying that they think I'm older than that. So I don't wanna hurt my feelings. But yeah, I'm gonna be arriving to a big landmark in less than a month. And
Everybody in the comments, tell us how old you think Abel is.
no, no, please, please cut that out
And
because you
how
will
old do you
actually
think
get
I
them.
am?
Okay. Okay, I gotta go. Just kidding. No, so what was I saying? Yeah, RDLs. Like it's been happening now for years, and probably in many of those occasions I was just a wuss and I overreacted. But like I many times had that where, okay, like I'm doing it as man, I'm not sure what's gonna happen if I go up like 2 more kilos. Like it just feels weird. And in those cases, I didn't have an injury or anything. It just felt like shaky enough that I just didn't dare to go heavier. Last year, I pushed it and I was like, okay, I don't care. Like I'm not gonna be a wuss. I'm gonna go up as heavy as I can. I got up to like 170 kilos for like 6 or something, and then I noticed that I had like some mild umbilical hernia. So then that kind of scared me. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna take a break from like this compound stuff. Let's see how bad it is. Then it turned out that it really isn't, like it's not, nothing is really happening to it, and it doesn't hurt. It's not getting worse. So I got back to RDLing not that long ago. And like just the other day, like completely pristine reps, wasn't even that heavy. I could have gone like 10 kilos heavier even. And just one of those reps in my lower back, I'm just feeling this like this cracking feeling. I was like, oh fuck, the fuck was that? So re-rack the weight, and a week passed by, and it's not wasn't like disastrous, but I still feel it. So I'm like, and I heard it from so like basically any time a client of mine has an injury of some kind, or like just something that sidelines them for like a week even, it's always the RDL. Seriously. Yeah. And I'm actually being pretty conservative with the RDL with them. Like a lot of people I see on Instagram, like they basically put the plates down on the floor. So either their back is actually like rounding a bit, or at least their pelvis is kind of turning over. I don't even do that. So like they are doing it with a completely flat back. The ROM is a bit more limited, and still. So I don't know. I think at this point I can just make that call that I'm going to be doing like back extensions of various kinds with lightweight. And God damn it, if I won't have good erectors like Steve Hall and Brian, then I won't.
Very mixed feelings these days with the deadlift variations. Because when I was young, it was probably like late high school, early college, and I was getting up to like the 400s. And I remember ironically, my dentist and my dad were like, you really got to be careful. It's going to mess up your back. Like, you don't need all that weight. And, I was very much in like the power building world, and like, that's ridiculous. These guys, if anything, it's actually better for your back, and, all this stuff. And then you have guys like a Jason Blaha who says that, I mean, at one point, Jason Blaha would talk about how you didn't need to warm up. If you warm up, there's a problem with you. Like, you should just be able to go in max, which I don't know. I don't know about that one. But
yeah, that's an interesting way.
Yeah. So anyway, I think he's changed his stance on that, hopefully. So anyway, but like he would say like he's deadlifting so much at this age, and a lot of people do, but man, I don't know. Like I really have changed my stance on that a little bit. And I do see people consistently get injured with deadlifts. I mean, even Eric Helms has said years back, he's like, when you do powerlifting, you are basically agreeing to slowly degrade your body over time. And like, show me a real, like, you can show me a lot of bodybuilders who are not too banged up after years, but
like Lane Norton. Oh wait, nothing.
But show me somebody who like really competed in powerlifting for a long time, who doesn't have a slew of injuries. Like, I'm sure they exist, but it's pretty rare. This is the same thing why, like, I was considering jujitsu for a while, and I was like back and forth. And then, I was like, oh, like this could be cool. And then I actually rolled at I went to like one lesson with Mike Isertos like 2 or 3 years ago. And I remember him saying like, oh no, like you will get hurt, like stuff's going to happen. And Joe Rogan has talked about how pretty much every person he knows who does jujitsu long enough has like severe neck issues and spine issues, and their joints. My hygienist's fiance, he's been doing it for like 12 years. His joints are a mess. Like, it's like, you just don't see it where you do that long and you don't have these problems. And so when it comes to like 1 rep maxing with powerlifting, I think that for most people does end up being a problem. Now, if we're talking higher reps, sure, less risk of injury. But I know for me, every time I get around to like low 500s for deadlift, something would happen. Like every single time something would happen. And then with RDLs, even last year, we were talking about like you and Mario Atomic and a few other people were doing them. So I was like, yeah, I'll see if I can get back into them. And I was doing like, I did 315, like muscularly was super easy. Like I was doing it for, I don't even remember how many reps, but like, normal reps, and it was muscularly so easy, but something would happen. And it's like, I could barely walk for a week. And I know some people could say, you've got some imbalance, you got to see a PT and work on this and that. Maybe, like, I'm open to the idea that maybe there are things that could be worked on. But I would also question, like, does it matter? Like, could you just not find alternatives that do not have that same risk? And again, I'm not claiming it's definitely one way or the other here. I'm saying I'm more open to that one. But I was a little surprised to hear you say that with RDLs though, because for me, it was more like traditional deadlifting that was more of an issue.
Actually, that's what I was thinking now that, so with conventional deadlifts, I actually never got that far. I think mainly because I didn't use straps and my grip is super weak. So I think like maybe the heaviest I deadlifted was like less than 100 kilos, like conventional deadlifted. But, I was like, I don't know, 10 years younger maybe. But it's interesting that I used to have like a lot of back pain while sitting. Like I remember in college, like I could just not sit through a class. Like I was constantly like turning back and forth, and my back would crack so loudly that like people sitting next to me would like look at me like, what the hell was that? Like, are you falling apart here? And I started started following some like splits that I found on the internet. Like that's when I started lifting basically. And like it was such a drastic and very like acute improvement in how my back felt. Like immediately felt way better from like a little bit of conventional deadlifting. Basically, that was the only like axially loaded exercise I was doing. And then, yeah, I mean, with RDLs, really, as soon as I go over like 120 kilos, basically, it like things just kind of start happening. Sometimes it will be as little as later that day my back will be a bit sore. Sometimes it will be like this. Luckily it never got any worse than this. And then actually so I'm thinking probably I just have like a weak spine genetically. I don't know, because like I had the same thing with back squats one time, like what was like 110 kilos or something, and like totally like normal reps, wasn't even close to failure. I was like midway through the set, and like just like this felt this like crack in my back, like holy fuck, like re-rack the weight. Yeah. And again, like was sore for like 2 weeks or something. Then it went away. I was like, okay, no thanks. Like that was more than enough back squatting for me. So
I was doing fortitude training, and not directly getting coached by Scott Stevenson, but talking with him quite a bit. And he had me do it was these like really slow eccentric rack pulls from like right below the knee. And I mean, I was literally, I mean, you can imagine how much you could do on a rack pull. I was doing like 185 and pounds, not kilos. And I was just going super slow. It was at the end of my workout, super slow, crazy burn in the traps and like, the upper back area and everything. And even then it would be like the next day, I'd be like, yo, what is going on here? Like it just, something was off. And so I've done limited range of motion. I've done trap bar deadlifts. I've done conventional, I've done sumo. It just seems like there's something. And then, again, you brought up Lane Norton. It's like, okay, so Lane Norton, I'm sure has tried everything under the sun, right? I mean, he's seen the top specialists. He was a world record holder in the squat, very impressive deadlift. And he has gotten back to it numerous times. Like he's gotten back up there, but he's re-injured himself so many times. And again, I mean, this is an intelligent guy who's got some of the world's best people around him, and it still happens, and I'm sure he is going to be dealing with a lot of chronic pain later in life, from that. So, and again, if you can go for a world record, maybe it's worth it to you. But again, I'd be interested. Maybe I will have, a specific like sports physical therapist on to discuss this more. But I really do question about like the really, really heavy deadlifts for a lot of people.
Yeah. And I mean, so there's no question that like, doesn't even matter what the lift is, but there's a point where you go heavier than that. And it's just significantly more dangerous, quote unquote, dangerous, or not even quote unquote, just actually dangerous than how it was up to that point. Yeah. So there's definitely that point. But I wonder though, like what would happen, or like what would be the benefit I would gain from at least keeping something in it, even if I'm not trying to progress on it, but like some deadlift variation, almost as a maintenance thing of like just exposing my spine to some kind of like heavier loading. Yeah. Because I guess I could gain like some good erector musculature by just doing like light back extensions. But like I would think that, if your spine can tolerate those really heavy loads, then maybe there is some benefit from some sort of loading like that, and then trying to find some safe way, or just not actually trying to progress on it, but just do it almost as like part of your weekly routine. Like I'm going to do some, I don't know, deadlifts with 80 kilos at least or something.
No, I do agree with that. I think that, I don't want to say it's been like established, but like has more or less been shown to help with injury prevention, right? I mean, certainly having older individuals going through some of these movements, I think is really helpful. And you can imagine how somebody who, if you just, let's say you had some kind of like ridiculous scenario where somebody was just doing machines. So they got really strong at the leg press, really strong at like machine chest supported rows and pull downs and whatever. So they have all this muscle mass with this strength potential, and they never do a squat or a deadlift or whatever. These are like that person would probably be very prone to a mishap in regular everyday life. They move a couch, they pick up their kid, like they're so not used to that, even though they have the strength potential, that they get injured. And that's how a lot of injuries happen, right? It's not necessarily in the gym. A lot of times it is, but it's like you moved the wrong way, you weren't thinking about it. I had last week or 2 weeks ago, I like picked up, it's funny, I'll like pick up my weight for a dumbbell row when it's like 100 pounds, but I'm very cognizant of how I'm picking it up. But then I had laterals and it was like 17 and a half pounds. So I just kind of picked it up and moved it. And like, I kind of like, I don't, technically threw my back out, but I screwed up my back. And to finish my workout, I had, my wrist was kind of screwed up. So I'm there doing laterals with 17 and a half pounds with a powerlifting belt on and my wrist wraps. Thankfully, this was in my own home. But yeah, it looked very ridiculous. But it was saying like you just turn the wrong way. It's when you're not thinking about it. So I do absolutely agree that some squats, some deadlift variations and everything should be kept in there. I'm talking about like taking it to the max where you're, like you said, progressing or trying to progress constantly and all that stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think a final topic here kind of relates into that a little bit in terms of time off, deloading, taking time away. Is it beneficial versus, and I know we had debates on refeeds maybe like a year or two ago. I think deloads was another one we kind of had debates on. I don't love Menno's idea of like, you just deload a specific exercise. That to me just seems kind of odd. But I think the whole idea of like, I don't think anybody needs like a week off, for instance. I mentioned earlier, I'm going to have natural hypertrophy on the podcast after you. So anybody who's listening, if you want to see that one, make sure subscribe for more. And also,
what a guest list you have today, Jesus. SSD, Abel, and natural hypertrophy.
Just right, kidding. Big trio. Which means that one will also have crappy audio. So, but anyway, so I think he's like totally against deloads, and I know a number of people who are against them. I guess my general stance on them is I don't think they're like super beneficial unless you're really pushing things all the time. I think there's people, you would know this better than I would, but I think people like Borge and whatnot will talk about how they'll just train at a low enough volume that they never need a deload. Where do you stand with that stuff?
Yeah, I think we don't know for sure. So I think nobody even like like Eric Helms, for example, is a obviously super knowledgeable and well-read person and researcher now in the field, and he's a proponent of deloads, but probably he would say as well that like it's not like we know for sure exactly how frequently we need them or if we need them, but like he would say that we have enough theoretical reasons to do deloads so that it's worth doing them and recommending them. And the Menno would make good solid arguments for the opposite. And like basically his thing is, fatigue is mainly local in the muscles. There is some central fatigue, and the nervous system gets impacted somewhat, but it's something that recovers literally in like hours, sometimes even minutes. And for example, if everything is progressing really well, then why would you take a deload? Or if everything is progressing really well, except for, let's say, the quads or something, why would you need to deload your biceps? Because your quads are taking a hit in their rate of progression. And also, from a behavioral standpoint, actually, that would be one area where I would agree with him just personally. Like I many times toyed with the idea of like, maybe I should really do this deloading thing, like more traditional one, like every 6 weeks or 12 weeks, whatever. But I just, even when I don't really enjoy working out, because I have those times, I really hate taking a week off or even just like going there and just bullshitting around with like really submaximal weights, because that is the one I hate the most. Because if I'm there, I want to do something that actually I feel like makes some sense. I don't know. Taking a week off, I hate it because it just throws off my routine. Because like going to the gym kind of like gives a bit of a framework to my day, or extra framework, which is pretty important to me. And I don't know, from a psychological point of view, I just really don't like them. But I think that the argument that Berge is making, and probably Menno would say the same thing, or I know he would, that if you're basically training at the level where you can continuously adapt to that stimulus, then you don't need to deload. I would think that is probably true up to a point. At an advanced level, I could see there being an argument for, even though it's logical, like you really need to push things to like a really high level at times, and that might be more than the level of stimulus or volume that you can sustain for a long time, and then you will need to let that fatigue dissipate. So it might be the case that at a certain point that is just simply needed. So yeah, so I would say I agree.
Brought that point up to Menno. So does he have a counter argument for that?
So that specific one I didn't, because I just knew more or less what he would say, and I think more or less his argument would come down to there is no real good evidence that overreaching, functional overreaching, is really doing anything. Any kind of, like, we have like one or two studies, and some like those are slightly hinting to the idea that it might do something, but we also have a bunch that are not showing that. So it's just and his whole philosophy, like, he used to be called Bayesian bodybuilding, and that is basically like the reason he was called that way is because, like, you're using like a Bayesian statistical model to like really try to predict what is likely going to happen if you do certain things. And if the evidence is showing this at the moment, like, we have just no good reason to use that as a basis of our structuring, or like as a cornerstone of our training setup. So that's more or less what he would say, I think, if I brought that up.
It is interesting to see different camps. Like right now, Steve has me deloading every 6th week, basically, and you're doing half the volume and half the weight as the other set. So like effectively, what is that really doing? I guess you could keep it in the groove, but like, to me, I don't really see what advantage that would have over just taking a week off. And I understand, like, psychologically why that's a problem for some people. I actually enjoy weeks off because it's like I have plenty of other things I can be doing, and it's not like there's never been a same thing with like cheat days. Like, I mean, I guess whatever you want to call them, big refeeds. I've never had it where I had a big refeed and then the next day I just can't get back on track. Like, I've always been like, well, this is the day. But I know some people do have that. And the same thing with like a deload for me. I've never been like, well, this is my deload week. I'm just not going to go. Like, it's never even been a thought. So I take the week off. I do other things. I get back to it. Do I think that going like for half the reps and everything, like, obviously in this case, I'm getting coached, so I'm doing it, but I don't think it really matters. I think, and that's something I will talk with natural hypertrophy about later on, is, what, because he seems, and I have to kind of get his stance a little bit more clear in my mind there, but I just don't know if it like matters. But I could see the argument that when you're so advanced, in the same way that some people say you have to focus on specialization cycles, right? If you want to grow after 10 plus years, you have to focus on like this body part, because I mean, what they say, whether or not it's true, is that it's going to need so much more volume to continue to grow, but it's going to cause a systemic fatigue that you're not able to recover from if you did that with all of your body parts. So maybe your volume is 50% higher for biceps and triceps or whatever you're deciding to specialize in, and everything else is lower. Same idea and principle with this whole deloading thing. Well, you need to just ramp everything up, but it's going to be too hard to do that long term, so you need a break. I don't know if we have any actual evidence to support that. I mean, it makes sense, at face value, but I don't know if we can really say for sure.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those things where whichever strategy you're using, I think you will feel like you're validated or vindicated, because so let's take one of my clients, for example. I don't do pre-planned deloads with them. For one, because like we do use auto regulation, and secondly, like I cannot think of one who didn't have like some like vacation or something coming up where they went and then they took some time off, or they got sick or whatever, or they died sometimes. Just kidding. So not funny. So And like if you're looking at how they are progressing, it would be like, okay, so they are not adding like 2.5 kilos or 5 pounds to the bar every single time. Of course not. Some of them might, who are like newer, but like they go up, like, okay, they might stagnate for a workout, then they break the plateau, then they progress for 2 workouts, then they stagnate a bit, like, so it would be kind of like go like this, like non-linearly, and in a month they might put on, I don't know, 2 kilos or 5 kilos or whatever on the bar. And then you look at someone like Steve's clients or Eric's clients or whatever, whoever is using traditional deloads, and it might go, I don't know, they might follow like a non-linear or a linear periodization model, like what Eric's clients are probably doing. So, okay, week 1, like 4 sets of 8, then 4 sets of 7, 4 sets of 6, then deload, then next block, and cool. This month they put on 2 kilos on the bar, like my clients, or Steve's case, whatever, the volume escalation. So I think you're going to see that it's working. If you're doing traditional deloads, probably you're going to be pushing the envelope in some way. So by the time the deload comes, you will feel like you needed it. If you're if you're doing the Steve and RP method, like the volume escalation, then definitely you're going to be upping things. And then when you're returning, you're going to be like more sensitive to the stimulus. So, and you're going to be like fresher, of course, like a week off feels good. And like the exercises and the higher intensities of effort are newer. So you're going to get a bigger pump and whatever, so more sore. So you're going to feel like, oh, wow, like this really did something because it's working really well. And if you're not doing deloads, you're probably going to feel like, yeah, actually, like I can train and it's pretty fine without deloads. Like it's pretty cool. So that's another reason why we won't really know for a while, I think, what is really the optimal way. Sorry, that was a long monologue.
No, I mean, I think it makes sense. And there's certainly, like I said, when I get to my week 5 with Steve, whether or not that's like an optimal level of volume and intensity and everything else, I can tell you that like I'm looking forward to the next week to take off. So like that would not be sustainable for me. Like the 5 days a week with 20 plus work sets to 0 RAR, basically, it was like that week I'm just like dead. So but then I come back and the first 2 weeks I'm like, this is pretty damn easy. So is it better to have that or not? I think it's interesting because Mike will reference pros a lot and what people do, but I don't know of any other, well, more in powerlifting, but I don't know really like pro bodybuilders who do this like ramping style. Most of them just go in, they do their work, and like they might periodize to some degree, but not this whole like dramatic addition of volume over time, dramatic addition of volume.
Yeah, it's I think that's more of a Mike invention, or someone at RP who is the brain, but I guess it's Mike who is the brain. Yeah, I mean, the thing is that since we don't really know, I mean, we also talked about it yesterday, but we don't really know what is causing muscle growth. I mean, we know some of the main movers of it, but like, what is the real formula for muscle growth? Like, that's the most reliable one. We have good guesses, but because it's still kind of like this not fully discovered area, I think you can have a model like Mike's, and it will probably, if it's working for people, then you can claim it with a straight face that is the ideal way to train, and it might be. We just don't know. So Mike's method might be the best, or it might be some of the bros from the past. Like, we just don't know.
Well, I think at the very least, it's reasonable to say that the deloads aren't going to hurt much. And I know some people would say, oh, it's just you're wasting your time, you're wasting potential. But like, man, we have so much evidence of people who not only who deload and who have amazing physiques on par with anybody who doesn't deload, but also people who get injured and take months away, and then they're basically back at it. I mean, there's numerous Olympia competitors who literally just take like a month or more off and come back. I mean, Kevin Levrone famously would take months and months off, come back. But even among like natural people, Jeff Albert's, like, he literally took a year off from lifting. Are we going to say that if he didn't have that year off, now that it's been however, like, I don't know, 5-10 years later, however long that's been, that he'd be so much further beyond where he is now? Highly unlikely, right? He just caught up to where he was. There's another study showing 6 weeks on and 2 weeks off compared to just no breaks at all, made the same progress. I mean, I think it's very hard to say that deloading is really just going to screw up all your progress.
Yeah, and I think for that reason, I think it's quite fine to go about it by preference. So yep. If a client asks me, like, can we do traditional deloads or like pre-planned deloads every 5th week or something, I would never say no. So I might say my opinion, like, this is what I think, or this is how necessary I think it is. But if they want to have it, like, have at it. Like, I personally, I would hate to do it that way, just because it would be like an extra variable I would have to manage, and I really like the flexibility. So that's me. But if that's, I actually have a client that I remember, starts with an F. So F, if you're listening to it, it's you. And he asked for it, and it was no problem. So he's been doing it since then.
All right.
So yeah,
that was, I think, everything I had written down to cover. Where can people find more of your stuff?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So SSD Abel on YouTube, and Able to Lift on Instagram, because I'm able to lift.
Yes.
For now. And in a week, it will be whatever thing. Yeah.
All right, man. Thanks for chatting.
Yeah.